Hey all our fantasy lovers, and welcome back to another episode. If you love the magical worlds of the Maas-verse, this podcast is right for you. Join us as we dive back into the magical world of A Court of Mist and Fury, discuss the emotional devastation, and fangirl over the unforgettable characters in chapters 41 through 44. We are Just Read It MK.
I'm M.
I'm C.
And I'm K. In this episode, we will be visiting the Night Court and attending our first Starfall celebration. Let's dive in.
Awesome. Okay.
I matched my book today.
You
I
do.
didn't. A
All right.
blooper reel.
I'm gonna try really hard not to just talk through every little thing that I have underlined because I know it gets to be a lot. Okay, so in 41 through 44, we are coming back from visiting the queens in the human realm, discussing briefly what happened and how they're going to handle the proof that the queens are asking for. They're essentially going to need to go steal an orb called the Veritas and use that to be able to show the queens the city of Valaris. In order to steal it, they will have to go to the Court of Nightmares in the Hewn City, so under the mountain, and they'll have to come up with some sort of distraction to distract Kerr, who is Mor's father, so that Azrael is able to steal the orb while they're distracting him. So we have our first introduction to the Hewn City. We're going to have some, obviously, more banter between Feyre and Rhys, which we love. We're also going to have a little bit of an argument where they both say more than they should in the heat of the moment. We're going to get some more notes passed back and forth, text messaging, and then jump into Starfall. Duh.
Starfall.
I was like, I know there's something else. And then we get the beautiful holiday of Starfall, which is considered Ninsar in all other courts in Prythian, but it is Starfall in the Night Court, so we'll get to see that as well. All right, let's jump in. So they, like I said, they've just come back from visiting with the queens, the human queens in the human realm with their sisters. It did not go well. The human queens want some sort of proof that Rhys is good and not evil. So they're discussing with Amren what happened, letting her know that the queens wish for proof of their good intentions and they can be trusted. I like that we get a little interaction because Rhysand is always trying to build up Feyre's confidence throughout all of this book. So we see a new little part to that. So Amren's response is essentially, well, so Feyre and everything that happened to her wasn't enough. And Feyre, because of those words, immediately goes into, well, of course I wasn't enough. I'm never enough. She kind of starts digging back down into her little bits of depression. To which Rhys responds, she is more than enough, and tells them the queens are fools, they're frightened, they're not quite sure what to do, they're vain, they are set in their ways, which is very true for humans. We don't like changing at all. Cassian brings up the option of, well, let's just get rid of all of the queens, and Rhys says, one, that's going to take way too long to do, not to mention we can't even get into their castle or their palaces to be able to do that. On top of that, we don't know if killing them would actually hinder them getting the book because they're not sure what kind of magic has been set up around the book. We do know that the human queens have to give their half of the book willingly, and so we don't know if killing them is going to stop that from happening or hinder it. And I sent you guys a text message about this because when I read it the other night, the way I read it, it just sounded odd to me because we get this instance where Mor says, I can try, let me go to their courts, let me see if I can talk to them. They know who I am. They know I've dealt with the human queens in the past. And Azrael is very against it, tells her, you're not setting foot in the human realm. Not even you're not going to their palaces. You're not setting foot in the human realm whatsoever. And that they would string her up and make an example of you. And it just makes me wonder because I can understand why Amren didn't go to meet with the queens or why Amren never goes to the human realm because she's always the one that ends up getting left in Valaris to protect the city. But why is it such a big deal that Mor doesn't go to the human realms? Because the first time she goes is this initial meeting with the queens. And she even tells Feyre she won't go until that point. And now we have Azrael being very firm in his decision to not let her go. Is that just him caring for her, knowing that his spies and himself haven't been able to get in, so there's no reason she should, and he doesn't want to put her in danger? Or is it something more? I don't know. I don't know if it is or not. But we do learn that the castles for the human queens were built by the Fae to protect the humans from the Fae. So if you step foot in it, there's a good chance you're not coming back out. Feyre mentions that Mor had brought up two people from the past that had been a part of the war while they were with the queens. Feyre essentially brings them up again, wants to know more information, and is considering, would they be able to help us? So this is Miriam and Draken. So Miriam was a half-breed, so she was half human, half fae. Because she was born in a specific kingdom where humans were all completely slaves. There was no chance of not being a slave. She was born of a human mother who the conception was forced. Therefore, the Fae male wanted no claim over her. So because of that, Miriam was also a slave. So she is given by the Queen of the Fae in this land to the Queen's betrothed, Draken. Draken is horrified and lets Miriam escape, and then Miriam is essentially the one who opens his eyes to how evil the Fae Queen that he's about to marry actually is. So he leaves her, actually joins forces with Jurian, and for 3 years spends it trying to find Miriam, the slave who ran away. They end up fighting in the war 500 years ago with the humans and the Fae and Prithian. And then after they finished fighting in the war, or towards the end of the war, Miriam and Draken and take their people back to the land where Miriam is from so that they can kill the Fae Queen and bring her people back. So we essentially have Joseph bringing his people out of Egypt is how I think of that story, because it's so very similar. And now Miriam and Draken and all of their people, human, Fae, and half-breeds, all live on their own island separate. And Feyre is asking if they would be able to come back from their island to be able to vouch for them. And Rhys says, even if we did want to ask them, it's not going to vouch for his character because that's just somebody else's opinion. It's going to be the same as Feyre saying you should believe Rhys. So it's not really going to work in their advantage when it comes to the human queens. Cassian brings up that they might need them in the end when it comes to this war, because Draken, he also is a flying fae, and he has an aerial army of his own that is as good as the Illyrians are. So very high praise from Cassian, first of all. On top of that they may actually need their assistance in the war. We don't know yet. But Rhys at this point is saying, no, that's not something we're going to discuss, at least not right now. Rhys says that he plans to actually show them Valaris, and he's going to do this with the orb called the Veritas. It is well known to the human queens. The humans in the war 500 years ago used it. I don't know in what regard, and that it has been in Mor's family for years, many, many years. And it is very similar to Mor's power and her family's power. It was rife with truth magic she'd claimed to possess. So supposedly the orb has the same kind of truth magic that Mor has, that her bloodline also bore, and that it was one of the most valued and guarded talismans. Which I'm just like, if it's one of their most valued and guarded talismans, and Azriel is able to just like slip in and steal it, it's not guarded very well. Or they're just in a false sense of security, not thinking that anyone would actually come and steal it. Who knows? So they've decided that everyone is going to go to the Hewn City. They will all act as different kinds of distractions while Azriel goes to steal the orb. They describe it as it would be absolute truth, not illusion or trick. When you use it to show them, it would be like peering into a living painting. Feyre is a little apprehensive, obviously, in going to the Hewn City because it is underground, for one, and other than the prison, she hasn't gone underground or been in a ton of closed spaces because of her issues after Under the Mountain. On top of that, we know that Amarantha fashioned Under the Mountain after seeing the Hewn City and the Court of Nightmares. So she knows that there are probably going to be some things, some similarities between Under the Mountain and what she sees in the Hewn City. So before they go, she does go and visit the artist quarter, but she doesn't actually go in. She just stands on the outside. And she says she's been there for 2 months now in Valaris, and she still hadn't worked up the courage to actually walk through it. And she doesn't want to now because she's afraid that she'll go and fall in love with it, and then it'll be destroyed in the war. So she still holds off on going. And while she's kind of on the outside looking in, she is kind of reminiscing on the fact that she had started to feel flickers in that part of her that thought of painting and thought of the colors in that manner, that it had images, but nothing solid has started flickering, and nothing that was roaring with life and demand, not in the way it had that night, seeing Rhysand kneeling on his bed after a nightmare, completely naked, winged, and tattooed. So that is the first painting that she's seen since Under the Mountain that has actually stayed in her mind. She comes back and Rhys is there. He is kind of sulking. He's struggling with something. He doesn't want her to go to the Court of Nightmares. He is debating asking her to stay. Her response is, "Don't lock me up in this house. Don't shove me aside." And he says, "I'm not asking because I don't want you to go. I'm asking because I don't want you to see who I have to become tomorrow, who all of them have to become. It's not something that I want you to see, how I will treat you and treat the others." And she says, essentially, this is the mask of the High Lord. And he says, yes. And she asks, why? Why don't you want me to see it? And his response is, because you've only just started to look at me like I'm not a monster, and I can't stomach the idea of anything you see tomorrow being beneath that mountain, putting you back into the place where I found you. So he's saying, I'm not telling you can't go because I don't want you to go, or I want to lock you up or anything along those lines. It's because I don't want you to go backwards. I don't want you to fall back into that depression or anything along those lines. So he's essentially saying, I'm doing it because I'm thinking of your well-being, but I'm not going to force you one way or the other. Farah says she is willing to go to the Hewn City because she'll be doing it with Cassian, Azriel Moore, and with Rhys. That she trusts all of them, that if something goes wrong, they will get her out. So she, at this point, says, let me help in whatever way I can. She doesn't care what it is. And she tells him that she trusts him, which is huge because she is, like we said, going under a mountain, dealing with things she hasn't had to deal with in 2 months now, and she's doing it all because she trusts him. We find out a little bit more of Moore's backstory. We've kind of jumped around it, hinted at it a little bit, but her father actually declared that she would be sold, literally sold in marriage to Eris, the eldest son of the High Lord of the Autumn Court, so Lucian's eldest brother. We haven't met Eris at all. We know from Lucian that his brothers are mean, ruthless. We don't like. Rhys kind of reiterates that Eris had a reputation for cruelty and more, despite begging not to let it happen. For all of her power, all her wildness, she had no voice, no rights with those people. And Rhys's father, who was alive at the time, apparently he didn't care whatever his cousins did with their offspring, including if they just used their offspring as breeding stock. So Rhys takes Moore to an Illyrian camp for a couple of weeks for a visit. While there, she meets Cassian, and she decides that she's going to lose her virginity to Cassian because she wants to choose. It's all about choice for her. It's not about losing it. It's just about being the one who gets to pick who it's with. So she chooses Cassian not just because of who he is, but because he is one of the most powerful Illyrian warriors. When Rhys finds out, there isn't much that he can do, just that there was a mess after it happened. Moore's family is incredibly upset with her for making this decision because now she is no longer a high value when it comes to getting married. So they beat her up badly. They actually nail a note to her stomach. We don't know that yet. Right now, it's just we know that they literally nailed a note to her body and left her on the border of the Autumn Court, told Eris essentially that she was his problem. Eris refuses to marry her because she slept with Cassian, who he considers a lesser fairy. So he leaves her there in the middle of the woods Thankfully, Azrael does find her a day later, and Rhys says it took all that he could to keep Azrael from going to either court to slaughter them.
Quick thought here. Going back to what you had said a couple pages prior, do you think part of Azrael's fierce protection of Moore is simply because he was the one that found her? He knew the state
could
she
be.
was in. He's seen the fragility of her life that maybe no one else has gotten a chance to see because she is so strong and powerful.
Potentially.
Just a thought.
Right? And I really think there's more to Moore that we don't know because we don't get a lot, like, we get a little bit more information on her, the past with Eris. We get a little more information on her power, and we actually get to see her fight alongside Feyre later on in the next book. We get a little bit, like, we get little snippets, little pieces of Moore and her story, but there are still so many questions when it comes to Moore. A lot of fan theories that we'll discuss at one point later on, some of them thinking that maybe Moore is a witch, but I really think there's more to her that we just don't know about because it isn't included in any of the books. So I'm hoping that more information on her is going to be part of the next couple of books because I'd like to see that because I like her character a lot. And I agree. I think to an extent it's his feelings for her combined with he was the one who found her at this point. But I also think it's something else that we just don't know. I don't know what. No idea.
So
I just
it's
think
not
there's
something
something
that
else. There
continues
has to
in
be.
Crescent City. You're not telling us yet.
No.
Dang it. I was kind of hopeful that that might be part of the crossover because that's the only realm part that I haven't read yet. So I was kind of hoping.
Right? Not that I can think of,
Some
but
more is still
I
a
have,
question for
yeah,
it.
I don't know. We'll see when we get there. We might be able to pick some things out in Crescent City to tie it to. Feyre expresses in her own mind that she is not frightened, but she can tell that Rhysand is worried for her. Even after he told her what he'd need her to do, even after she'd agreed, he'd been aloof and haunted. And she realizes it's because he is afraid for what she is going to see and what might happen to her while they're in the Hewn City. So she starts teasing him while they're flying to the Hewn City, which I love. So we get a little bit of their banter. So she tells him that Amryn and Moore told me that the span of an Illyrian male's wings says a lot about the size of other parts. So this line right here in this one book, literally it is one sentence, has just exploded in the fandom. There are t-shirts, there are mugs, there are stickers. Like, wingspan is a thing now because of this one single sentence in book 2. And I love it. It cracks me up. I saw something the other day that was like, what was it? The wingspan for each of the 3 of them correlates to their book that they fall in love with. So, like, Rhys's book is this one, ACOMAF, but Cassian's book is Nesda's Silver Flame, which is a little bit larger. So then someone was like, well, that means Azrael's book is this whole 4-part session that she is working on now. And it just makes me laugh so hard. I love it. Cracks me up. So she is teasing him. And it gets him to stop being aloof, being haunted. It stops him from thinking about what they're about to do and from worrying. Then she says, and they said Azrael's wings are the biggest. So Rhys, of course, is going to tease her right back and says, okay, as soon as we get back, we'll get a tape measure out and we will measure. Mischief danced in those violet eyes and a wicked grin flashed across his face. I just love it. At that point, he tilts down and like plummets as they're flying, makes her scream, which he didn't do the first time, which we talked about, but makes her scream this time to the point where she has to hold him a little tighter, buries her face in his neck, and he's just laughing and says, you're willing to brave my brand of darkness and put up one of your own, willing to go to a watery grave and take on the Weaver, but a little free fall makes you scream. And she says, well, next time you have a nightmare, I'll just leave you to rot. And he's like, no, you won't. You like seeing me naked too much. But of course, he is just laughing through the whole thing because this is their banter. This is what gets them out of their funk. they're so good at doing it back and forth with each other, being that person for the other. So at this point, and I love this because we're going to get it a little bit later on in a couple of chapters too, but Feyre actually runs a fingertip along the inner edge of one of his wings, and Rhysand shudders, a soft groan slipping past my ear, and he tells her that is very sensitive. So she does it again, and she asks if it tickles. And he says, it feels like this. And then he moves in closer to her and blows on the shell of her ear and kind of brushes his lips against it. And he says that that is essentially what it feels like when someone gently touches your wing. And then he goes on to say, if you want to get an Illyrian male's attention, you'd be better off grabbing other parts of them than touching their wings, because if you touch their wings, they're going to kill first and ask questions later. And Feyre asks, well, how does that work during activities between two people? I guess I should say the disclaimer because I totally forgot to do that. So disclaimer for this episode, if you haven't read the books, this is some spicy scenes that we get into in this chapter as well as in the next couple of chapters. We're not going to go into explicit detail on what happens in those scenes, but they are very specific and detailed themselves. So we will hint at them.
And giggle.
Brush around and giggle, hands down, giggle like we're teenagers. We'll kind of circle around what's happening, but we're not going to explicitly give you the details on it. So if you haven't read the book, go read it. So this is leading into one of those scenes. So Rhysand does say that if you touch your rings in a certain spot or in the right spot, that they can finish without needing anything else. And Feyre asks if he has ever found that to be true. He says no, because he has never been with anyone he trusted enough to have his wings out during the encounter. And we know with Amarantha that she didn't see his wings at all because he was afraid of what she would do while they were being intimate. And Feyre's response is, well, that's a shame because I bet you would get into a lot of interesting positions with those wings. We just need like a little book that outlines what those interesting positions would be with wings at some point in the near future, please.
So you're saying like an Illyrian Kama Sutra?
Exactly. That would be hilarious.
You know what? We're going to say this. It's going to get out somewhere and the fandom is going to come up with it. It's going to happen.
I really hope so. I really hope so. We need our ACOTAR wingspan Kama Sutra. Not that we'll be able to do any of it because we don't have wings, but we need it.
Here we go. Bat Boys boasting bashfully.
There
Title
you go.
right there.
I love it. Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Now I'm going to turn red because, there we go.
Perfect. Well, this is a perfect time to lead us into that scene that we love so much. Almost. Not quite yet. They do actually get attacked as they are flying into the hewn city. Rhys brings them down to the ground. I love this, and I'm going to point it out every time we get it. Rhys slammed into the ground. Superhero landing, because that's what I think of every time I read anything like that. Cassian and Azriel are there with him. Rhys is starting to bark orders, telling Cassian to take Feyre into the city. Feyre says, no, let me help. So he pauses and is like, okay, why? Give me the reasons for why you should stay here and not go to the hewn city. So she outlined, if they came from another High Lord, I might be able to detect that. I can track just as well as you guys can, so let Azriel and I go try and track down our enemy in the woods while you and Cassian fly above. And Rhys is like, okay, you make valid points, I'll let you do that. So that's what happened, but Azriel and Feyre are not able to find anything. The enemy that shot ash arrows at them didn't hit them. Thankfully, they were able to shield in time because they were actually paying attention. The enemy actually picked up all of their arrows and they're not able to find anything or figure out who it was. And even Azriel's shadows can't find anything. So the enemy was even hidden from his shadows. So at that point, they can't wait any longer to go visit the hewn city because they are expected. More changes. Feyre into a gown very similar to what she wore under the mountain. So kind of the two swaths of fabric that cover her breasts and then meet in the middle with a little belt and drape down below and behind to mostly cover the other intimate parts as well. However, this one is black, whereas she wore very colorful ones under the mountain. This one is like Starlight. Moore is wearing something very similar, only she is in red, which is kind of her signature color. Both of them have kohl on their eyes and their lips are painted blood red. So they're definitely a little bit more crude in their attire when they visit the hewn city. So the Court of Nightmares lay behind a mammoth set of doors carved into the mountain itself. There was no one outside, no village, no signs of life, nothing to indicate a whole city of people dwelled within. And Feyre, she kind of compares Under the Mountain to the hewn city of the Night Court, saying that Under the Mountain was the work of a child, but the Court of Nightmares was the work of a god. Because where Amarantha's Under the Mount was just a series of halls and rooms and levels, the hewn city is a true city under a mountain, built into a mountain, like this giant cavernous room, not even room, space that is an actual city that you can walk through. And it has a literal castle inside it. The castle is obviously the official seat of the High Lord of the Night Court. She says there are gates that are in front of the castle. The gates are great scaled black beasts carved into them, all coiled together in a nest of claws and fangs, sleeping and fighting, some locked in an endless cycle of devouring each other. And between them flowed vines of jasmine and moonflowers, which I love because we get jasmine repeated when it comes to the scent of Rhysand and his townhouse, that jasmine is a common scent that Feyre smells around him and in his homes. And she says that she could have sworn the beasts seemed to writhe in the silvery glow of the Fey lights around them. The Gates of Eternity. That's what I'd call the painting that flickered in my mind. So this is what I think like our fourth painting that she's actually thought of now. That side of her is starting to come out a little bit more. She and Moore go in and they don't talk at all. They walk past everybody. Moore had actually fashioned Feyre herself, changed her into the clothes before they entered the city, and fashioned her hair onto a crown atop my head right behind the black diadem that had been set before it. So again, Feyre has been dressed in a crown, which is something we have consistently seen through all of this book and even the end of book 1, that Rhys puts her in a crown all the time. So they make it into the throne room, which is an actual throne room. And Feyre mentions that the same beasts that were on the gates outside the castle are on everything inside. They're on the pillars, the columns in the throne room. They're on the throne itself, fashioned out of a few of them, a head snaking around either side of the back, as if they watched over the High Lord's shoulder, which I love the description of those beasts, because Feyre also describes Asriel and Cassian in the same manner, that they are flanking Rhysand. So I think this is kind of a similarity between the beasts that are flanking and decorating the hewn city are mimicked in Cassian and Asriel, only when in the hewn city.
So, point here, but I don't know if you've seen the theory that Feyre is actually not a great artist and everyone's just humoring her artistry through the books. And what if it turned out like that? Like there's a whole Reddit thread, and trust me, I went down in the depths of it and I was asking, see, did I miss something where they said she wasn't great? And the reason why I questioned it is because I've seen it everywhere recently. But then if you read the descriptions of how Feyre's mind is describing stuff, it's so beautiful. How could she be a bad painter? So I was kind of counterpointing it with C earlier, just, well, she was brought up with the ability to paint when she was early on and then went without it for a while. Did she lose the skills? Do they come back? Is she rusty at first and then good? I don't know if you had seen that one, but the descriptions in the Night Court was what had me start going down that rabbit hole earlier today, and I got lost for a while.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Kay is really good at not looking at any sort of theory.
No, I've looked at some, but I don't want to. I don't know. I just kind of read it as it is. I've honestly questioned, though, how good she actually is, just with some of the things that she has put in, like, just some of the descriptions, that the way she describes things and now how things are actually described, the way they look, completely different than the way she is. I'm like, is she actually that good, though? I don't know.
So you hadn't seen the theory, but you still questioned.
I did, yeah.
Okay.
So I guess
So
it is a valid point.
I have also it not in regards to Farah's painting, but Kay, you mentioned Farah's description is her interpretation, and it's not always exactly what it looks like, or it's not how someone else would see it. And I have seen theories that make people wonder, because this is the only series that we actually get from a person's perspective, whereas all of the other books are kind of from that third party perspective. We get some inside thoughts of whichever character is leading the chapter, but this series is truly from Feyre's perspective. We only get her perspective other than the snippets from other people. And I have seen where people in the fandom question Feyre's perspective. Are things as bad as they are? Were they worse? Were they different? Is Rhysand actually bad? But Feyre finds a connection with him, and so therefore she doesn't think he's bad. Like, is her perception skewed in any direction? So it's interesting that you mentioned that, and that her painting could be good, could be bad. I know when we get in a couple of chapters to her painting the cabin, I have an opinion on that. So we'll
Listen,
talk about that then.
listen. When Moore comes in, I was reading that part, and I can just imagine, especially with eyes. What if she comes in and she's like, "Oh, you've painted,"
Right?
and
Like,
I'm
my
like,
favorite
"What if
cabin.
it's actually?" I know, like she didn't even get. She just started painting like it was her place, and I'm just like, "Who does that?"
Right? And I get it. It's the first time other than Starfall where she actually paints. And I'm happy for her, but
I just
is this
imagine a bunch of
really
Down
stick
to
that
figures
canvas?
just like put up everywhere,
Right?
like the
It's
little
just like
kid
very
art from
basic
kindergarten.
eyes. Yes.
And they're just playing it up like it's actually good. Oh yeah, that looks great. Oh, you forgot these people's eyes. You didn't paint them just to make her feel like she's actually
Right?
good. I don't know. That's so terrible to think about.
And now I'm like, okay, maybe there is some validity because I was super defensive reading it, and then I'm like, wait, where did it come from? Why are we thinking this? Because why does she have all these interests? So yeah,
But you could also take it as when she becomes Fae, she arguably gets better at like everything else. So is her painting improved from when she was a human? Like, is it just beginner to intermediate level when she's a human and then becomes advanced master kind of level when she becomes Fae? That could be the difference though too. We don't know.
interesting. Oh,
So just an extra little thing to add in there. The Yoon City and the original throne scene because I love it. Okay, Kerr, her father, asks where Rhysand is. Her response is he arrives when he wishes. Feyre is taking in the space before he gets there. And I like this line that she talks about the food, all the different types of foods that are laid out on the table, and that her mouth may have watered if it were not for the high fae and their finery. And she specifically says, were it not for the fact that no one touched the food, the power and wealth lying in letting it go to waste. Which I think really exemplifies the power and the wealth of the high fae and their feelings of being at the top of the social hierarchy. And then she says she felt it, felt him, so felt Rhysand. The very rock beneath my feet seemed to tremble, a pulsing steady beat, his footsteps, as if the mountain shuddered at each touch. Everyone in the room goes still, because Rhysand is coming in. His power is not masked, so it is at full force, so that everybody in the Hewn City can feel it. And she says, first Cassian and Azrael appeared in the doorway, the general and the Shadow Singer, most powerful Illyrians in history, and that they were not the males she knew. They looked different. They both had their masks on for who they needed to be in the Hewn City. And this is when she realized that they're completely decked out in armor and they have all of their siphons on them. So previously she saw them with only 2 siphons, 1 on each hand. Now she sees them and they each have 7 siphons, which they are the only 2 who have ever had 7 siphons. And I love that she talks about this because Rhys is coming in, everybody's kneeling, and she says they should be afraid of them, afraid of me, because she's finally realizing that she is a powerhouse as well, and she should be feared. Rhysand comes in. He has a crown of stars that he is wearing, but he is completely back to his black tunic that seemed to gobble up the night. The most powerful High Lord ever born, the face of dreams and nightmares, and the full impact of him threatened to sweep me away. My blood sang at the power that thrummed from him, at the sheer beauty of him. So I love Feyre's description of him as he's coming in, because it goes to show she is not afraid of him. She sees the beauty in his darkness and is looking past all of it. And I love it, because I feel like she's finally understanding how much she cares, or is starting to care for him. Rhys stops before her, welcomes her to his home, and essentially brings her up to the dais with him. He sits down on the throne and perches her on his lap. They're going to be the distraction for Kerr, so that Azriel can go steal the orb. Essentially, they're going to be a distraction by getting nice and close and touchy-feely with each other in the middle of a throne room with tons of people around. There's music going on, there's people dancing, kind of grinding up on each other. I imagine this scene, and I'm going to date myself a little bit on this, but the third Matrix movie, when they're on Zion and they're like all in that cavern grinding and jumping up and down, and the music's blasting, like drums. That is what I picture in this scene. I don't know why, but that is what I picture for that scene. So there's lots of fun happening in this throne room. Rhysand and Feyre are having their own little intimate fun, even though people are watching. They're watching other people, like they're not watching each other. They're just staring Kerr down as they touch each other. And because her dress is so revealing, they can see exactly where Rhysand's hands are, how they're very close to intimate parts of her. And Feyre is kind of reminding herself throughout all of this that she is beautiful, she is strong, that she survived, she triumphed. She kind of has her mantra going on in the background to keep herself from breaking, or from really realizing what is going on, or letting herself dwell on what's going on. Rhys teases her a little bit, said try not to let it go to your head, that everyone's bowing at your feet, and that every male in here is contemplating what they'd be willing to give up in order to get that pretty red mouth of yours on them. And of course, we know Rhys just loves her mouth, so of course he's going to bring up her mouth. She talks about how he has apologized in advance, and she can feel in some of his touches, the way his nose brushes the side of her neck, or the way he kisses her neck, that he is apologizing for what they're currently doing, because this is essentially the first time they're touching each other in an intimate way other than a hug, and it is in public. It is to make a scene. It is not for the pleasure or the enjoyment of each other. It is to distract her and make a scene. I do love Sarah's writing through all of this, because arguably this isn't a spicy scene. Like, there's nothing crazy happening. There's no official touching in the intimate parts. But the way she writes it is just the yearning and the burn that's there for those things to actually happen makes you love this scene. And it feels like it's spicier than it actually is, which I think she does a really great job in all of her books. I think she does something very similar in Throne of Glass, where we don't actually get any explicit scenes until book 5. And even then, it's not very detailed. I think this is very similar. Of course, until we get to Nessa's book, then things completely change. But for these scenes throughout, it is very well written when it comes to the intimate. Kerr is reporting on what's going on through the whole thing. They're still rubbing up on each other, touching each other, that kind of thing. Feyre feels a little self-conscious because she is getting turned on in regards to how she's being touched. It's been a couple of months since she left the Spring Court, so a couple months since she's been with Tamlin, so it's been a little while for her, and she's concerned that he's going to take it the wrong way. Of course, he's whispering into their bond, this is just your body's reaction to me, to being touched, which his body's having the exact same reaction, and he's not self-conscious about it whatsoever. But he is still trying to apologize because this is the first time for anything with them, and it's in public.
Did you notice that, and this isn't the first time it's been described, they talk about the Jasmine at the townhouse, but in this scene and throughout the rest of the chapters we're going to go over today, she mentions how often he smells like citrus and the sea. I was reading that and I noticed how many times through this set of chapters, citrus and sea. So very salty, fresh with citrus, very calming, very cleansing. Where Tamlin, she never described as a scent that sprang out as a clean smell. Like we talked about the metal tang, and really that was it. So
Right,
kind of
and the
caught my eye
rotten
and
smell.
made me wonder.
But it's just another little piece to show differences between Tamlin and Rhysand, or between the Spring Court and the Night Court. I agree. I like that.
Exactly.
Feyre, while this is all going on in her head, is realizing that Rhysand would do anything. Right now they're setting this distraction so that Azriel has the time so that he can go find the orb. And she's realizing again that Rhysand will do whatever he has to. He'll give whatever part of himself he needs to make it work. And that he perhaps thought he wasn't worth very much because of everything that he'd had to do in his past. So at this point, she kind of goes into his head, or cracks her mind shield open a little bit, just to say, you are good, you are kind, this mask doesn't scare me, I see you beneath it. She does torment Kerr a little bit that she is going to put him on a leash, which I think is pretty funny because Kerr is being mean, he's being a butthole, and says, this one, it seems you enjoy putting in cobwebs and crowns, which I love the wording, cobwebs and crowns. And Feyre's response is, well, perhaps I'll put a leash on you then. And we're starting to see Feyre break out of her shell a little bit, in the sense that when she has to put on this kind of mask along with Rhysand, she is owning it, which I love. Once Azriel makes it back with the orb, he kind of gives them a little nod. Rhys tells Feyre to go to Cassian, stay with him, so that Rhys can finish his business with Kerr.
She did mention feeling in the moment with Rhys like she was going to catch fire and burn, and he did have to calm her down from becoming a living candle because she didn't want to express how different she was magic-wise from some of the others and expose the Autumn Court. Which
Yes.
different phrasing of it, of course, but the whole living candle brought me back to Aelin in her practicing and her depths of fire, trying to see past the spicier illusion of it. I kind of tied it back to that too, because same description of being a living candle in some way, shape, or form.
Yes.
The embodiment of that flame.
And that she's essentially worked up to a point where she feels like she's going to burn alive. And that it made her feel alive at the joy of being touched and held and alive. And she's mentioning it because it's different from when she was with Tamlin. The way she described it with Tamlin was a way to forget, but with Rhys, and we'll get this in the next couple of chapters as well, is that it's not a way to forget, it's a way to come alive, which I like the difference between the two of them. So she does go to walk away, and as she is walking past Kerr, he calls her a whore, which is what everybody called Rhys under the mountain, Amarantha's whore. At that point, night exploded into the room. Kerr was on his knees because this is Rhys, obviously getting upset on Feyre's behalf. Rhys still lounged on the throne, his face a mask of frozen rage, but the music stopped, everybody stopped, everyone froze, and Rhys makes Kerr apologize, and he does this by essentially breaking multiple things, bones, tendons, ligaments, in Kerr's hands and arms. And it's very brutal, and Sarah does a very good job of outlining it so that we can really feel or get a sense of what Kerr is feeling right now, or what Feyre is seeing on him, on his face, how he's reacting to it. Bones cracked, another cracked, the elbow disintegrated, the bones on his other arm splintered, another crack, and his pinky finger went saggy. So just really descriptive ways to describe what is happening. And Rhys, finally Kerr does apologize, and Rhys says, go dump him in his bed. When you wake up, don't seek a healer, let it heal naturally so that you can have the pain for a long period of time. And this is where Feyre says, the High Lord, whose hands and mouth and body had suddenly made me feel awake, burning It didn't make me forget, didn't make me obliterate hurts or grievances. It just made me alive, made me feel as if I'd been sleeping for a year, slumbering inside a glass coffin, and he had just shattered through it and shaken me to consciousness. The High Lord, whose power did not scare me, whose wrath did not wreck me, and now I didn't know where that put me. And she says, knee deep in trouble seemed like a great place to start. So she is realizing how much she is starting to care for Rhysand. So they do end up leaving the Huon city after all of this happens in the throne room. But instead of winnowing Feyre back to Valaris, Rhys takes her to the edge of a lake where he can apologize, because even though he's apologized multiple times, even though she agreed to it, said that she trusted him, he is still upset with what had to happen and wants to continue apologizing to her. And I love that her immediate response is, what do you possibly have to be sorry for? And he says, I shouldn't have let you go, shouldn't have let you see that part of us, of me. And she says, I'd never seen him so raw, so stumbling. Her response is, I'm fine, that the choice had been hers to play that role, to wear those clothes, and to let him touch her in that way. We knew what tonight would be, what it would require of us. Please don't start protecting me. And Rhys gets a little frustrated at this point because she isn't comparing him to Tamlin. That primal male rage he'd just shown Kerr reminds her of when Tamlin shattered the study. But there are very stark differences between them because Rhys did it to somebody else to protect Feyre, whereas Tamlin did it because he was hurting Feyre and was so mad at her, accusing him of hurting her. So very different perspective or different instances. But like I said, Rhys gets frustrated with her and the implied comparison. He says, I will never lock you up, force you to stay behind. But when he threatened you tonight, when he called you whore, and that's when she realizes that's what they'd called Rhysand under the mountain for 50 years, he said, it's hard to shut down my instincts. Her response is to get frustrated with him. So not the best knee-jerk reaction from her, but she responds with, then you should have prepared yourself better. You seemed to go along just fine with it until Kerr said, and then he cuts her off. Says, I will kill anyone who harms you. I will kill them and take a long time doing it. Hate me, despise me for it, whatever. And her response is, you're my friend. And she starts crying because of the amount of emotions that's going on between the two of them. She doesn't really know why she's crying at this point. Maybe it was because it had felt real on the throne with him. And now she feels like it wasn't, that it was all an act. And so she's mourning what she thought they were building and realizing that he was doing this for the good of their court. She says, I understand you will defend your true court and punish threats against it. I don't want you to stop telling me things or inviting me to do things because of the threats against me. And this is where darkness ripples again. We see his wings tear from his back. So we've mentioned this in the past, that is a sign he is outraged. He's frustrated. And his response is, I am not him. I will never be him or act like him. He locked you up and let you wither and die. Stop comparing me to him. Which I think she needed to hear, because she has been comparing the two of them. But it's kind of hard to do with everything that she went through under the mountain and then with Tamlin. It's hard to not compare. But at this point, Rhys says, you think I don't know how the stories will get written. So he is essentially saying, this story, I know it's not going to be written with me as the good guy. I'm the bad guy in this story. I am the Dark Lord who stole away the Bride of Spring. I am a demon and a nightmare, and I will meet a bad end. He is the Golden Prince. This is kind of how Rhys sees himself. He's the Dark Lord. Tamlin's the Golden Prince, the hero who will get to keep you as his reward for not dying of stupidity and arrogance. Which I love the word choice, because that is so true. And that's exactly what we talked about at the beginning of this book, is how everyone was like, oh, Tamlin, you should get this and you should get that, because you did absolutely nothing, but you apparently deserve it. Rhys is reiterating that. And Feyre's response is, what about my story? What about my reward? What about what I want? And Rhys says, well, what do you want? Because Feyre doesn't know. And Rhys knows that. So his response is, I thought so. Perhaps you should take some time to figure it out one of these days. And this is where Feyre's temper gets the best of her, where she says something that she does not mean in regards to him. Essentially tells him, I may not know what I want, but at least I don't put a mask on to hide behind. At least I let them see who I am, broken bits and all. Yes, you do it to save your people, but what about those masks? What about those around you? Letting your friends see your real face. Maybe it's easier not to, because what if you showed them and they rejected you? Who could blame them? Who would want to bother with that sort of mess? And at this point, he flinches, and she calls that out, that the most powerful High Lord in history flinched, and I knew I'd hit too hard, too deep. So Rhys says, let's go home. She doesn't dispute going home, that Velaris is her home. But at that point, they get back to Velaris. Everybody kind of disperses. Feyre goes off to wait for him, and he doesn't come. He doesn't show up. She realizes that she'd been awful, that he told her those secrets, those vulnerabilities and confidence, and she had thrown them in his face because she knew they would hurt him, but that she hadn't been talking about him and was actually talking about herself. And that she knows he and Tamlin are different, that Rhys's protective anger tonight had been justified, and that she would have done a similar thing, had a similar reaction if it was Rhysand who had been threatened. But she's also starting to realize that maybe Rhysand needed to flirt with her as well, just as much as she needed the distraction as he did. And maybe what she'd said to him, she'd said it because she realized that she might very well be the person who wouldn't let anybody in. And that she was jealous because she wanted him to smile at her the way he had smiled at Cressida in the summer court. And she's realized that she doesn't want to pretend anymore. She wants to take like their little banter, fake, like half dating relationship and stop pretending and actually try and see where it gets them. That it might be hard and she was scared and it might be difficult to deal with, but that she was willing to try with him, to be something, anything, whether it was purely physical or more, something in between. Beyond that, she isn't sure. But at this point, she decides that she wants him and just hopes that he is willing to try and wouldn't walk away from her. Which I love that she says that. If he didn't walk away when I voiced what I wanted him, was him. Because we have a little foreshadowing of that in the next couple of chapters. He does not come back. He is actually gone for 2 days. She attempts to write letters telling him, first of all, that she wants to talk. Then telling him that if he moved elsewhere, she should at least have been given the key because she's leaving the door unlocked. She tries to tease him that the burglars are getting antsy. They're about to come steal from him. And then Cassian says, you're sulking up at the House of Wind. That's very un-High Lord-like. And then she asks, is this a punishment? Do the people in your inner circle not get a second chance if they piss you off? You hateful coward. That's the last one that she writes to him before Starfall, but we'll get to that in just a minute. She does visit Amren during these 2 days where she and Rhys are apart. And it's a very quick visit, but I want to mention one specific thing in regards to it, because she gets there and Amren's response is, no hello, just the reason why Rhys bit my head off this morning. So like everybody knows, if Rhys is in a bad mood, it's most likely because of her. Because something happened with them. If he's in a good mood, again, it's most likely because of her. And this is where we find out that their enemies, whoever they are, we're not sure who, they're able to track Rhys's magic, which means that anytime he winnows, he uses his power, they can track it. So because of that, they don't want to be in Velaris anymore for him to use his power here, because then people, whoever these enemies are, will be able to see that they're in this area a lot. So they're going to go to an Illyrian war camp, but not for another 2 days because they have Starfall. And it's the first one that they've actually been together in 50 years, which we'll get to that in a little bit because that's super sad, but we'll get there. And Feyre is about to walk out when Amren says, when Rhys came back after Amarantha, he was a ghost. He pretended he wasn't, but he was. You made him come alive again. So this is the first time somebody outside of Rhys has said something in regards to Rhysand's person after Under the Mountain, how much he was struggling because he puts a really good face on so that no one can see it, or we assume no one can see it. This is the first time someone's actually coming out and say, hey, he was in a bad place too, but then you came along and you have helped him come back from that bad place. And Farah's response is, well, you're all lucky. He's lucky to have all of you. And Amren says, no, we are lucky to have him. And this is where Amren says, I have known many high lords, because she's super old, cruel ones, cunning ones, weak ones, powerful ones, but never one that dreamed, not as he does, of peace, of freedom, of a world united, a world thriving, of something better for all of us. Not just him, not just a select few people, but for everyone. And Feyre's response is he thinks he'll be remembered as the villain of the story. But I forgot to tell him that the villain is usually the person who locks up the maiden and throws away the key. He was the one who let me out. Which I just love. It makes me want to cry. Rhysand. Feyre gets dressed by Nuala and Caradwyn for Starfall. She has no idea what it is. No one's told her. She's asked multiple people. No one will give her a response. And I'm going to point it out because I'm going to compare it to the Spring Court like we like to do, because she went to 2 different festivals with the Spring Court where no one told her what was going on. But the difference is in the Spring Court, they didn't tell her because they expected her just to obey and not need to know. Whereas in the Night Court, they're not telling her because the big reveal of it is just going to make it so much better for her. Huge difference between why she isn't being told in this scene versus in the Spring Court. So her dress, which is arguably one of the most talked about outfits in the entire series, is Feyre's Starfall dress. It is crafted of tiny blue gems, so pale they were almost white. It clung to every curve and hollow before draping to the floor and pulling like liquid starlight. So literally she is dressed in starlight, which I love. And of course, she has not a crown, but she does have 2 combs that are holding her hair back of silver and diamond, and that she looked like a fallen star, according to herself, which I love the description. She goes up on the rooftop, and it is actually Cassian who is there to fly her up to the House of Wind, which she's a little disappointed, obviously, that it wasn't Rhysand there to do it, and that Cassian had been keeping her company the last couple of days, helping her train while Rhys was skulking. Cassian takes her up there, and she realizes, there are lots of people in the House of Wind to celebrate. The entire city has kind of gone quiet as well as gone dark. Everyone's turned their lights off for whatever is about to happen. And it's at this point that she kind of realizes that Amren and Cassian, Azriel, and Mort have all become her friends, not just her companions or the people that she knows, but actual friends, which is not a point that she ever got to with anyone in the Spring Court, except for maybe Lucian, and even then that's a little iffy. Mor, for once, is in white instead of red, pure white, a slip of silk that showed off her generous curves, and she glances over Mor's shoulder and realizes that Azriel is staring blatantly at the back view of Mor's curves. So it's right on track. Mor tells her, it won't be long. Feyre wants to know what it is. And Mor is like, well, that would just ruin the surprise of what Starfall is if we told you. And I pointed this out because I don't know. We're going to talk about Starfall in relation to some other things later on in other books. But Mor tells Feyre that Amren is not there because there's something about Starfall that disturbs her. We don't know what it is. Mor says she probably just does it to be contrary. But Mor's exact words are, something about Starfall disturbs her, which just makes me wonder, why? What about it disturbs her? So we'll tie that in later on. Mor and Feyre talk for a little bit. We learn, again, what we had talked about a little bit earlier, that it was Cassian who Mor chose because she wanted to choose. And that they try not to talk about it because after it happened, it caused a rift between Rhys and Cassian and Azriel, because Azriel obviously has a crush on Mor, but she selected Cassian instead of him. Mor doesn't like what it has done to all 3 of the guys, the men. So because of that, she has chosen not to repeat what happened with Cassian, either with Cassian again or with Azriel at all. We do get information that Moore has had other lovers. Cassian and Azriel as well have also had other lovers, and I love the way Moore says this. She says, and Cassian has had them too, so don't get that unrequited moony woo-woo look. Like, such a girl thing to say, right there. Not actual words, so let's just make them up to express what we're trying to say. Cracks me up. He just wants what he can't have, and it's irritated him for centuries that I walked away and never looked back. And at this point, Rhysand interrupts them, tells Feyre that she looks like a woman again, and Moore's response is, wow, cousin, you really know how to compliment women. Feyre, of course, asks if he plans on ignoring her more, and he says, well, I'm here now, aren't I? I wouldn't want you to call me a hateful coward again. But he does tell her that he wasn't punishing her, he just needed some time. They don't get a chance to talk in the sense that Feyre has wanted to talk to him for the last couple of days because Starfall happens. He tells her to look up, and then that is when a star vaulted across the sky, brighter and closer than any I'd seen before. And everybody starts cheering, raising their glasses, as if it was as it passed right overhead and then disappeared on the curve of the horizon. And then more come. Another star crossed the sky, twirling and twisting over itself as if it were reveling in its own sparkling beauty. They were like living fireworks, and my breath lodged in my throat as the stars kept falling and falling. I'd never seen anything so beautiful. So again, Rhys is the most beautiful male she's ever seen. Moore is the most beautiful female. The palace on top of the mountain of the hewn city is the most beautiful place she'd ever been. Now, this is the most beautiful thing she's ever seen. So I love that it's all in relation to night court things. And then music starts up all across the city, and she differentiates this type of music to the types of music she's heard before by saying that this music was joyous and peaceful for the love of sound and movement and life. And I love that description of it. So it is essentially a joyous dance. She does notice that Rhysand is watching all of their friends dance with kind of a soft sadness on his face. And so she calls him out on it. He says, let's go talk where it's a little bit quieter. So they go off to a different balcony where it's just the two of them. And it gives them a chance to talk a little bit. She apologizes. He said, I said some horrible things as well. She says, I didn't mean it. I meant it more about myself than I did about you. Again, she apologizes. And that's about all they talk about. So all of the things she wanted to talk about taking the next step in their relationship, they don't really get to at this point. She is noticing the stars and realizes that they aren't actually stars. Henry says, well, our ancestors thought they were, but they're just spirits on a yearly migration to wherever, somewhere. Why they picked this day to appear, nobody knows. There are thousands of them that keep whizzing by, and he says they'll keep coming until dawn, or I hope they will. There were less and less of them the last time I witnessed Starfall. So Feyre asks what's happening with them. He says, I wish I knew, but they keep coming back despite it. Again, I'm going to bring it up later in books because it might possibly tie to other series. We don't know for sure. But he does explicitly say that there are less happening year after year. He does tell her something very, very sad, that while he was under the mountain with Amarantha, that Amarantha knew what Starfall was and how much it meant to him, and so she made sure he was busy doing things with her the entire night that Starfall happened, so that he was never able to go out and witness it. So this is the first time in 50 years that he's actually been able to witness Starfall. And the only reason he got through it is reminding himself that his friends were safe, that Valaris was safe, and that nothing else mattered as long as he had that. And Feyre says, that they don't know. She assumes that the rest of their friends don't know what happened to him on Starfall while under the mountain. And he says, no, because I didn't want to ruin their night or have them share the burden. And at this point, something blinding and twinkling slammed into my face. So a Starfall spirit slams into her face. She screams a little bit because who wouldn't? It's very bright. She assumes she's going to be blinded from it. She's not. Rhysand is laughing, of course. She gaped. Pale green light like drops of paint glowed in the flecks on my hand. Splattered Star Spirit. I didn't know if I should be horrified or amused or disgusted, which I totally agree with. I'm not sure if I would be disgusted or horrified by that. And she goes to wipe it off. Rhys says, it makes your freckles look like they're glowing, which I think is adorable. And a star careens through the air and collides with his face because she's distracting him. He didn't see it coming. And the entire left side of his face had been hit, like heavenly war paint. That's what it looked like. She could see why he didn't want me to wipe mine away. She grabs his hand and uses the paint of the spirit to kind of paint the shape onto his palm, playing with the glimmer and shadows until it looked like one of the stars that had hit us. And he was smiling at her when she looked up in a very un-High Lord-like, with glowing dust on the side of his face. And she grins back at him, and his smile falls immediately because this is the first real smile she's ever given him. And he made a point of pointing that out back in the summer court. And so now we're multiple chapters, multiple weeks down the line, and she is actually smiling, truly smiling with joy in his presence to him. And he said, smile again. And he tells her that she is exquisite. And it's at that point that she smiles broad and without restraint. And then they go back to their thought for a thought game. And she says, you owe me 2 thoughts back from when I first came here. Tell me what you're thinking. And he says, do you want to know why I didn't speak to you for the last 2 days? He says, because I was convinced that you'd throw me out, and I figured hiding was a better alternative. And she says, well, who would have thought the High Lord of Night Court could be afraid of an illiterate human? And then he tells her, while looking at her mouth, because he has a fascination with her mouth, says, I'm wishing I could take back that kiss under the mountain, the one that was brutal and demanding. And her response is, why? And he says, because I didn't make it pleasant for you. I was jealous and pissed off, and I knew you hated me. And she starts to think this is dangerous territory, and then she realizes this is honesty. This is what honesty and trust look like, and I had never had that with anyone, not even Tamlin. And she realizes that there is a hunger and a longing and a surprise in his gaze that is mirrored in her own. So she asks if they want to dance, if he wants to dance with her, because she wants to go down and dance with their friends and enjoy Starfall together. And I think she does this not just because she is at a point where she's actually ready to go dance with them and celebrate with them, but because she realizes that Rhys might not do that if she doesn't initiate, that he might stay up here and stay apart from them because he doesn't want to dampen their joy and their happiness. So she asks him, let's go dance. He, of course, agrees, and they dance all night. But I loved how Sarah words this because she says she wants to go dance down there with them, with their friends, where the music beckoned, where life beckoned, where he should spend the night with his friends, and where I wanted to spend it with them too, even with the strangers in attendance. I did not mind stepping out of the shadows, did not mind even being in the shadows to begin with, as long as he was with me. My friend through so many dangers, who had fought for me when no one else would, not even myself. And at this point, Rhys-san brushes his mouth against her cheek, and she realizes that she is interested in having more of a physical relationship with him. And he responds with, I am very glad I met you, Farah. And he smiles at her with a smile the world would likely never see. The smile he'd given up for the sake of his people, which I love that he's finally able to smile like that around her. He has a reason to smile like that again. Whew, that's it. We made it there.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us for this episode of our deep dive into A Court of Mist and Fury. We loved getting to the Hewn City and seeing the original fantasy throne scene. I can't wait to jump into the next set of chapters where we get a little bit more spicy content, but we also get a little bit more yearning, a little more fighting. We're going to see Lucian pop in because why not, Lucian? Let's finish so that we can get back to reading and jump into our next episode. So if you haven't, just read it, okay? And we'll see everybody next time.